Welcome to the Heal Your Hunger Show, where we get to the heart of why you overeat and how to stop. If you struggle with food and weight like I did, welcome home.
Welcome, everybody, to the Heal Your Hunger Show. So happy to have you here. It is a great day to be alive, and I have balloons in my background if you happen to be watching, not just listening, because I had a retreat at my house. I had the most beautiful, amazing people at my house. These were women from my program, the second year of my program. They are amazing, beautiful, inspired, deep, hardworking, committed to their path of transformation. So we had so much fun. My boyfriend cooked dinner for us Saturday night. I held it at my home. They stayed elsewhere, but they came to my home each day. So I am feeling full. I'm feeling satisfied. My hunger is satiated. So yeah, amazing stuff. You know, it's amazing how when you connect at the heart level, how it does heal your hunger. It is the truth. It is not food we're hungry for. We are hungry for connections. So thank you, ladies who actually were at my house. If you're listening, thank you. You are beautiful. And for those I have not yet met, either in my programs or not yet in my programs, I just want to say, I love you already, and I want to be able to hug you and give you that love in person. And I hope I get to do that at some point. So I have a great show for you today. One of my favorite people is on. She's been on before, but she has a new book coming out right now that is so inspired and lovely. So before I get to that, I just want to say I typically am posting these shows in the Secret Sauce group. So on Facebook, we have this group for anybody who wants to join us, who wants to improve their relationship with food. So all you do is go to Facebook and type in the Secret Sauce to End Emotional Eating. Join us there. Let's talk. Let's connect. Let's give you the support you need to like break out of the diet mode. Enough with diets. Hello. If they were going to work, they probably would have worked. Okay. So let's step off the diet track and step into getting to know ourselves, addressing and healing difficult emotions, getting more emotionally balanced so that our relationship with food is more balanced. Okay. So join us in the Secret Sauce group. What else do I have to tell you? Oh yeah, we have the Quit Sugar Challenge coming up. Woohoo. And it's bigger and better than ever. This Quit Sugar Challenge is awesome. It includes mindset calls. So every morning I do morning mindset calls. The ladies have just loved this because all of a sudden they are starting to really see how emotionally dependent on sugar they are. It's not just a physical thing. The physical is real. That's why we do this together. That's why I teach you where all the hidden sugars are in your diet, how to get those out of your diet, all the 80 plus names for sugar. That's how the manufacturers hide the sugar in our foods, even our healthy foods that we buy at Whole Foods and Trader Joe's. So get the sugar out of your diet, get clean in your diet so you're not physically addicted, but let's address the emotional addiction as well. So join me at quitsugarchallenge.com. Sign up. We give you more support, more goodies. Become a VIP. It's like just a little bit more money, but oh boy, we do a lot of work together with the VIPs after each class. Don't try to do this food stuff alone. If you haven't noticed, it's hard to do alone. Food is everywhere. Everybody's pushing it. There's unhealthy foods everywhere. There's commercials everywhere, on TV that are just pushing all kinds of unhealthy foods and unhealthy habits around food. So get support from people who get you. Okay. All right. So on with the show. So my friend, Cynthia Thurlow, is a nurse practitioner, and she's the founder and CEO of Everyday Wellness Project. She's an international speaker. She has over 10 million views for her second TEDx talk on intermittent fasting, transformational technique. She has over 20 years of experience in health and wellness. She is a globally recognized expert in intermittent fasting and nutritional health, and she's been featured everywhere, ABC, entrepreneur, Megyn Kelly's show, Fox, KTLA, the list goes on and on. She's really beautiful. And she's a really good friend of mine. I just love talking to her. She understands we emotional eaters. So she understands that. And we talk about that in this show, about ways that we can use the science and the wisdom behind intermittent fasting without going into that danger zone where we feel like we're starving and we have to binge. Okay. So I think you're going to love this show. I just love this woman. Thank you. And on with the show. Welcome, Cynthia. So glad you're here. Thanks for being with us.
Absolutely. I've been looking forward to our discussion.
Yeah. And you are amazing. And you have an amazing book, which I have to tell you, the cover of which is gorgeous. These like exploding vegetables. but the cover of the book, it rocked my world. I mean, I've known you for so long. You're a good friend and I love what you do. And your TEDx talk is amazing. It's over 10 million views. So obviously you've hit a real chord. And, when I saw the cover of your book, it literally, something changed in me and I was able to, like, a series of events happened, but for a long time, I was getting up in the middle of the night hungry and eating like my breakfast early, like 3:34 in the morning. And then I had a long stretch to lunch. And it was I knew I was not in any way intermittent fasting. And I thought, wow, too bad I'm missing out on the benefits. And somehow when I saw the cover of your book, it sort of moved me. And then a series of events happened where I was able to start eating a little bit more for dinner, adding a little bit of carb, to my meal. But these are all sort of just happened, but I swear to you, the energy of you and your brilliance and the cover of your amazing book, which will absolutely be a bestseller, it all transpired to help me get 12 hours between my dinner and my breakfast. How cool is that?
That is so cool. And it's amazing how making some macro changes, adding a little more protein, adding a little bit more carbohydrate, depending on the individual, can make you feel more satiated. You don't wake up starving. Cause I can imagine my teenage boys are probably the ones that would wake up in the middle of the night and be hungry. So I think it's, for us, like it's a feeling, a sensation in the middle of the night. It just seems kind of out of the norm. And so I'm glad that you're able to super sleuth that and figure out what your body was trying to communicate to you.
It's wonderful. Cause now I'm like, oh, good. I'm part of the IF club. so, and I'm not, and as you know, like as an emotional eater, I know for me, I need my 3 meals. I need my space between each meal. I'm not good with going too long without food. Apart from that 12-hour window, which when you're sleeping, it doesn't matter as much. So long as you are, you do have a good dinner. So I love that in your TEDx talk, you make exceptions, like you kind of speak to the disordered eating people, because going too long without eating does send in, the alarm signals for people who have had eating disorders and diet mentality and deprivation stuff and just, some really messed up just relationships with food. So I love that you include that. And I do, I like the fact that I can at least get some benefit with the 12-hour window and I don't have to go to the 16-hour window. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. And I think it's really important for each of us to honor who we are and where we are. And physiologically, when some people go too long without eating, their lizard brain overtakes their prefrontal cortex. So it's an actual thing that happens. The lizard brain says, oh my God, I'm never going to get another bite of food. So I need to eat as much food as possible.
Right.
So the recognition that there's a threshold with which, 12 hours you're good with, but if you go to 14, it's really going to push that amygdala. It's going to push the lizard brain, the reptile brain. It's going to push it into gear, and you don't want that to happen. So I think for each one of us, we have to find a comfortable place with the concept of digestive rest, which is a beautiful one. And when we really look at the data and the research on how frequently people are eating, 12 hours of digestive rest is fantastic. Most people are not even doing that.
Yeah.
And I think, you really have to know yourself and your relationship with food. That's number one. Number two, I have some individuals that will just fast the first 2 weeks of their cycle. And that's the only time they fast, or they may cycle they may have fast a couple times a week. So obviously, if you are in a good position and you know that you're not going to be triggered by having a long stretch without eating, you could try 13 or 14 hours and see how you feel. And if you decide it doesn't work for you, that is totally okay. We know that there are benefits with eating less often. Some of them you have to fast a little longer to tap into, but that doesn't mean that you're not getting no benefit when you do a 12 or a 13-hour period of digestive rest. And I actually use the word digestive rest because there are people who get triggered by the word fasting. So I just say, let's say eat less often and let's have some digestive rest. And I recognize how important language is for so many of us. So just the acknowledgement that we honor ourselves as bio individuals first and foremost, and then really check in, like, am I having a day where my stress isn't out of control? I've slept well. I didn't over exercise. My nutrition has been on point. Then that might be a day that you do 12 or 13 hours without eating. Or you might have a day where the complete opposite happens. You've had a super stressful week. Maybe, you got into a fight with your significant other. You got stuck in traffic. You're just in a grumpy mood. That's probably not the day to think that you're going to go a longer period of time without eating. And the last thing I would say about that is we really have to learn how to fuel our bodies. And that really incorporates protein, healthy fats, and the right carbs. And if you do that, you'll definitely push that satiety cues, like protein's the most satiating, healthy fats, if it's not already part of the meat or the fish or whatever it is you're choosing as your protein, and then the right kind of carbs. Like I'm always going to push non-starchy vegetables as opposed to triggering foods, even for me, gluten-free cake, gluten-free cookies. That's like crack. So I don't even have it in my house. And my kids know this. I'm like, I can moderate some things, but the things I can't moderate, I eliminate. And I do much better with that mentality.
Amen, sister. Oh my God. What a farce the gluten-free, product line is, because so much of the time it's packed with sugar. So it really is so triggering for so many people. So can we just talk about that carb, the healthy carbs versus the unhealthy carbs?
Yeah. For me, I really lean into not really the grains, but certainly root vegetables. I think about sweet potatoes. I think about regular potatoes if you tolerate them. I think about the non-starchy. So green leafy vegetables, low glycemic berries, tart apples, citrus fruits are going to be better choices for many, many people than grains, because grains in of themselves, you may tolerate the grain, but it's the pesticides and herbicides that are sprayed on it that punch holes into your small intestine and create, leaky gut. That can be hugely problematic. And I think each one of us have to kind of decipher what carbohydrate works best for us. I'm not anti-carb, but as an example, I've been wearing a continuous glucose monitor intermittently over the past year and a half. And what that showed me was, as much as I love plantains do not like me. And I never felt bad. My blood sugar would spike, even like literally just coconut oil, sea salt, and a plantain, like not a savory plantain, always spiked my blood sugar. And so I would not have known if I hadn't worn a glucometer or worn a CGM or used a glucometer. And so I think for each one of us, we have to kind of experiment a little bit. Like some people do okay with tropical fruits, others do not. Some people do okay with root vegetables, but others do not. And so you have to do a little bit of experimentation. The things that come in a natural state, as I've mentioned, are going to be superior options to bread, pasta, rice. And it's not to suggest that you never have those things. Again, if you can moderate, that's fine. But for a lot of people, one piece of bread becomes 3, a bowl of pasta becomes 2 bowls of pasta. Whereas if you sit down with a piece of steak or a piece of chicken, when you get full, those hunger cues get signaled. So I think for each one of us, we have to decide. And the thing that, is both enlightening / frustrating is that as a middle-aged woman, what I ate in my 20s and 30s was absolutely positively what I could not get away with in my 40s. And now I just turned 50 this past year. And so I think for a lot of us, it's the recognition that carbohydrate portions have to be mindful of those. And that could be half a cup, it could be third a cup, could be it just depends on the individual, but we become physiologically more prone to insulin resistance, even if we're at a healthy weight. And so we really have to be I always say, be strategic, be mindful. And that might be the only, the only macro I encourage women to experiment with in terms of measurements, at least to have a sense of what does half a cup look like? What does a third a cup look like? What does a quarter cup look like? I know I can get away with some things and not others. And so I will sometimes measure things out if I'm trying to be really deliberate. But I think for each one of us, we really have to do some degree of experimentation, and carbohydrates for someone who's metabolically flexible and, insulin sensitive are generally not a problem. But if you've got a carbohydrate problem, you have to really be picking superior choices, like the things that are in their most natural state, like broccoli over pasta, or, sweet potato over, rice. I mean, you have to think of things that are much more in their natural state that didn't perhaps need processing to make them look the way that they do on your plate.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's really some great stuff. And yeah, I mean, if I don't think I would have lost the 50 pounds on, a carb rich diet. I just couldn't have. I had to cut bread out, and I was so addicted, so it's sort of like I think emotional eaters always have to think of the physical consequences and the emotional as well. Like on paper, all kinds of advice sounds great. The science sounds great, but when you factor in your need to stuff your emotions, or your need to soften the edges of life in an emotional way, that's when some of those foods become very tricky, because it's easy to feel addicted to them and just keep eating them. So yeah, the carb thing is really tricky. So thanks for kind of laying that out. And yeah, our bodies at different ages, it does make a difference, doesn't it?
It does. And it's interesting because I've gotten a lot of questions, just ironically over the past week, about this in particular, and trying to understand that there's so much misinformation. Like there's not this one size fits all bucket for all women at every stage of life. And I just say, okay, 20s and 30s, probably a little easier to moderate, gets a little more tricky as we get older. And it's not to suggest like you never have a glass of wine or you don't have a dessert on your birthday, but the recognition, like, is that going to derail all the other good choices you've been making? And so I think it's just being honest with ourselves. And sometimes that's hard. Like I was saying to my mom who's visiting, the blessing, there are a couple of blessings over the past 2 years. And one of them is I figured out I do better eating earlier in the day, not later, just personally. And so it makes me kind of a wet blanket if I'm going out to eat, because I really have to be very strategic. And I know I just don't feel good if I eat at 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And the recognition that you have to like honor who you are. And do I occasionally eat later than normal? Yes. But the recognition, like it's okay to decide for yourself that something serves you or no longer serves you, like really giving ourselves permission to lean into what feels best for us. Yes. And to not apologize for it. Like, don't we as women always feel like we're apologizing for everything we do? Like, sorry about that. No, don't apologize. Just say, this is what works best for me, and leave it at that. And if it triggers someone else, then that's their responsibility, not yours. Like you can't take ownership of that.
Oh, Cynthia, this is so good. That's why I'm teaching this all the time, because the thing that people are up against is their people pleasing nature. And it's like, and we so often give way to what other people want, when it doesn't work for us. And so much of the healing journey is exactly what you just said so eloquently. It's finding out what works for us and standing for ourselves and our needs. Oh, what an important lesson. And yeah, sometimes it takes a whole lot of decades to come to do that successfully.
Absolutely. And I think it's as a reformed people pleaser myself, it's like just standing in your truth and staying consistent with what works for you. Like I have had to learn, when I start to get that uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, like I'm leaning into, I'm going to do this just to not have to argue with someone. Now I'm just like, I don't think that works for me. And just leaving it that, like, no explanation, just no. And it's those healthy boundaries that we all need to develop. And I kind of applaud people that, came out of the womb like that. And then the rest of us kind of acquiesce through our childhoods and young adulthoods until we figured out, okay, that no longer serves me. So what can I do differently to make sure this part of my life is not, consistently focused on the needs of others, is over, usurping my own needs and diminishing what needs to happen in my own life.
Totally. I love that. Can we transition a little bit to the topic of intermittent fasting, since that's so much of what you do? Why is it helpful to have these, digestive rest? What's the science say?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question. And so when we talk about eating less frequently, it's important for us to understand that our bodies are not designed to be eating snacks and mini meals all day long. And it's as simplistic as the understanding that when we eat food, our body, our blood sugar will go up appropriately. And we secrete another hormone, insulin, to bring our blood sugar back down. But in the interim, the magic happens when our insulin levels are low. And if we're eating all day long and we're eating the wrong types of foods and we're keeping insulin elevated, we will never be able to tap into fat stores. We don't free up a special type of ketone or fatty acid that will diffuse across the blood-brain barrier and give us all this mental clarity because our insulin levels are low. We lose out on so many digestive rest properties. There are things like the migrating motor complex in the gut that actually we need 4 to 5 hours between meals, and it acts as a janitor. It kind of pushes things along in the gut. We get to a position where the bulk of the population, as one example, is prone to insulin resistance or is already diabetic. And it's because we eat too frequently, we eat the wrong types of food. So from just a very basic perspective, when we talk about 12 hours of not eating, it's because it allows our bodies to intrinsically be attuned to hormonal balance. And what drives weight loss resistance or drives obesity or drives insulin resistance is a lot of hormonal imbalances. And fasting is a way that we can kind of bring back into orchestration the signaling in the body that should work appropriately, hormonal regulation, allowing our bodies to work effectively and efficiently, as opposed to like the standard American diet and the mini meals and the snacks and devoid of fiber and anything that's healthy. And so I think that it's important for people just to understand, like, just that 12 hours is really honoring your body, because before refrigeration, before the processed food industry, before pasteurization, food scarcity was a real thing. But now we have a plethora of food and food-like substances available to us 24/7. And that has wrecked our health because we're being told to eat snacks and mini meals and eat, to stoke your metabolism. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, which if you eat the right foods can be true, depending on the individual. However, what we're eating is highly processed, hyper palatable fake foods that dysregulate communication throughout the body, not just insulin and glucose, but also satiety and hunger hormones, dysregulate sex hormones, thyroid hormones, communication between the brain and our body. And so I think it's very, very helpful for people to understand, like, the very basic things that are not served by eating with greater meal frequency. And the understanding that if we change the meal frequency and we change the way we put our foods together, that we can be on top of all of those things. And I think that's that empowering, like inspiring and empowering our clients and our patients to live their best lives, as opposed to being a slave, literally, to, their hunger and their emotions and just not feeling well. And I think for so many of us, we have gotten conditioned to not feeling good. And we just think that's our norm. Like, we just kind of go, okay, I'm X age and this is just the way things are. And I encourage everyone to fight against that, that kind of mentality, because it doesn't have to be that way.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Thanks for laying that out. It's so beautiful. And how crazy that we did go through a time, most people listening they've been through many diet fads, and the one where you eat like 5 small meals a day, which for emotional eaters were just 5 meals a day, or snacking all the way through the day, how unhealthy that is, and how crazy we thought that was how we got to our goal weight.
I know. And it's the recognition that maybe something we did before no longer serves us now. And that's okay. I always say know better, do better. And that's always my mentality. Like, I'm always learning. And so maybe what I did 5 years ago, I don't do now. Might be something small because I've been fasting for a while, but it's like each year I'm trying to, leverage up learning something new that will, make me healthier and happier.
Yeah. And when you say fasting, and I love that you did substitute the idea of, or the words digestive rest, but when you say fasting, you mean still eating, just with a longer
Correct.
window between meals.
Yeah. And so it could look very different. There's some people who fast, they fast for 20 hours a day, 16 hours a day, 18 hours a day. I mean, the key thing with fasting is it's flexible. So you don't have to be rigid. That's the one thing I think it's important, perhaps for your listeners to hear, is if they decide to try that in conjunction with working with you, it's you might just fast 2 days a week, and that's okay. It doesn't have to be that you're very rigid and every day this is what you do. And there are some personalities that works for, and there are others that don't. And so one of the things I love best is that it doesn't have to be rigid. There's only a couple things I'm kind of a stickler about with fasting.
Okay.
But they're generally things that I think seem really like reasonable. For example, like differentiating what breaks the fast, or differentiating what a clean fast is, or just talking about people who shouldn't fast. And I'll give you an example. Like if someone's pregnant or nursing, or pregnant, nursing, or breastfeeding, I always say, if you're growing a human or feeding a human, probably not the time to get in a position where you're limiting the amount of time in which you are consuming food during the day. Now, beyond that, you have some flexibility. I don't suggest fasting for kids, or if people are still growing. So like I have 2 teenagers, and my younger son, who doesn't like breakfast, we have to have this constant dialogue about when he's eating during the day, because he's a competitive athlete, and making sure he understands, like, it's not okay to fast. You are still growing. He's 5'6", his brother's 6'1". I said, You're still growing. So, we want to make sure we don't hinder or impede growth at your stage of life. But most other people, if they're feeling this, something they're interested in doing, there's absolutely ways that they can go about utilizing the strategy, but it doesn't have to be rigid, and it's designed to be flexible. And that is critically important.
Yeah. And the breaking the fast, can you talk about that?
I think I always say the longer the fast, the lighter the meal. So if someone were doing, for example, like a 24 or 48 hour fast, they might break their fast with bone broth. I mean, that's light and nourishing. I think it depends on the individual. And I say this because I personally like to eat a meal when I break my fast. I don't necessarily ease into it and do like a protein shake or bone broth, although that does happen on occasion. And so for me, it's always focused on protein and carbs, or protein and fat. Protein. In fact, because most of us are not eating enough protein in our diets. And so that's really important for a variety of reasons. That satiety, maintaining lean muscle mass, which we know is critically important for metabolic flexibility as well as insulin sensitivity. And so I always say, how do you stimulate and maintain muscle? You have to eat for it, which means enough protein. You have to lift heavy things, and then you have to sleep. And so really focused on those 3 things. So breaking a fast, you can break it with things that are light. Some people like to do non-dairy yogurt with some berries and maybe some nuts. Some people prefer to do bone broth. Some people want to have a salad. It's okay. Experiment. Find what works best for you. I like to sit down and eat a meal, because by the time I'm ready to break my fast, I'm really hungry. And that's what works best for me. But I would encourage people to try protein and carbs, or protein and fat. Never just carbohydrates, because you're going to get the largest insulin response to that. And never carbs and fats together, because they don't typically occur together in nature, and they can be hard to moderate. If you think about, like I always think about nuts as a good example, like macadamia nuts with salt, one of my favorite things in the world, hard to moderate if you don't portion them out and put the bag away.
Yeah. Hello. The bag is the serving, isn't it?
I know. Someone said to me, you really count the servings out? I was like, I do, because I like them that much. I have to be careful. Like that's one of those, the only way I can moderate is to put it away. I'm like, okay, we're going to be honest and just put it away, so it's not tempting.
Yeah. Nuts are so seductive, and to get the right portion, it's such a small amount. They're like, yo, that's not fair. I got to do that twice at least.
I know. And it's hard because, there's something about our brains that we eat something fattening that's got some salt, and it's intoxicating. Cheese, if people tolerate cheese is another thing, very hard to moderate. And who eats just a tiny 1 ounce block of little piece of cheese?
Exactly.
Most people are eating 10 times of that. And so I think that you just have to know yourself.
I love that. So that's such an important message all the way around. Can you talk about your book specifically? Because I know people are going to want to get their hands on this, and it's just coming out right now. So congratulations. I know it's going to just be a home run for you.
Oh, thank you. So it's Intermittent Fasting Transformation IF45. So it's a little bit of a play on that second TED Talk, and it's designed to serve women in all stages of life, like peak fertile years, perimenopause, menopause. Talks about the hormones, talks the way our body works. Like I talk in the book, like I'm talking to a patient, so that they understand, and then it makes sense. We differentiate between clean fasting and dirty fasting. We talk about a 45-day plan that will get people from, being a beginner to feeling more comfortable with it. There's over 50 recipes in the book that were created by a very dear friend who I think is an incredibly talented chef, Beth Lipton. They're designed to be very focused on protein and non-starchy vegetables, and certainly healthy carbs. And there are meal plans in there as well. And if you buy the book prior to publication date, so the book is being published on March 15th, there are a slew of bonuses. There are bonus recipes. There's actually a master class with me, as well as a program called Clean in 14, which I used to do prior to teaching IF 45. So it's a really nice way to honor ourselves as women. You know, it's the first book that's come out that's really focused on fasting in women, and we can't fast like men, and that's okay. Like, we should lean into our physiology and not apologize for it. See this reoccurring theme, like, yes, I'm no longer a people pleaser. I'm no longer apologizing for being a woman. Like, how many people felt like they had to apologize just because they got their menstrual cycle? Like, oh, somehow I'm sorry, this messed up your trip. No. This is just part of being a woman. You know, we shouldn't have to apologize for our physiology.
Yeah. Amen, sister. I love it. Well, congratulations. I love it. Whenever somebody's listening, definitely jump online, buy the book, you know, get those amazing recipes. I can't wait to dig into this. So, and I love all the wisdom that you share, Cynthia, and all the women that you help. I know so many women are inspired by you. They've gotten amazing guidance from you, and you're changing lives. So thank you for that.
No, and thank you. And likewise, I admire all the work that you do with your ladies as well.
Thanks so much. I have one last question for you before we sign off. And this being the Heal Your Hunger show, Cynthia, what is your deepest hunger?
I'm assuming this could be emotional. Or,
yes, it's not really food related.
Yeah, no, I think, you know, it's interesting. I was talking to my mom about this today, and it's like, I have like a drive and a desire to learn as much as possible so that I can share the things that I learn. I always say, like, I wish this is the book that I wrote for women that I wish I had when I was in my early 40s. So for me, it's a desire and a drive to ensure women don't make the mistakes that I did, because I thought I was doing it all right. And that's what I would say is probably like my passion. Like, when we talk about hunger, I think about what's my passion, and that's allowing women to feel comfortable in their shoes, irrespective of what stage of life they're in.
Oh, so beautiful. And you are doing it. You're doing it. So yay, you must feel fulfilled. I know you're a little tired because you've been doing a lot of these interviews. So, but congratulations. It's really beautiful. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Absolutely.
If you enjoyed this podcast and want to get free support, insider health info, exclusive invites to events, and more, visit healyourhunger.com.